Little more than 24 hours after an attempt on his life, for Donald Trump, the show must go on. He arrived in Milwaukee, where he'll be confirmed as the presidential candidate for the Republican Party later this week. The bloodied and defiant images of him are likely to define an election that was already turbulent. For President Biden, who is under huge scrutiny over his ability to run, took the moment to call on Americans to settle their differences by voting, not by violence.
We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high.
As we pray, I want to thank God for protecting President Trump and sparing his life.
At a local vigil, there were prayers and messages for the former president.
People here are shocked by what's happened to Donald Trump. There are dozens of his supporters here. They were already going to vote for him, but now they're even more energized.
Look what we do. Every time something happens, more money is raised.
I saw our epic leader stand up in the face of terror, being injured, and say, fight, fight. And we have got to fight now more than ever for our nation.
Crooks.
There is still so much unknown about the motives of the would-be assassin. 20-year-old Thomas Crooks from Pennsylvania is now dead. 50-year-old Corey Comprator was killed at the rally after diving on his family to protect them. President Biden says there will be an independent investigation into what happened. And as the Republican National Convention begins today, America's political rivals will now have to adjust to a totally changed presidential race. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News, Wisconsin.
Well, as we've been hearing, the FBI has named the gunman as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, who lived about an hour's drive from the site of the rally in Pennsylvania, in the town of Bethel Park. From there, our correspondent Tom Bateman sent this report.
This ordinary suburb of Pennsylvania woke to news that one of their own tried to kill Donald Trump. 20-year-old Thomas Crooks lived here with his parents, now being told their son was dead. The FBI and state police raided in the darkness, trying to work out what motivated him and whether he acted alone.
Does it make you feel knowing that
he's on the street?
Yeah.
Probably how anybody else would feel, you know, as far as I trust the neighborhood, I trust the people. There's never been anything happening that brought the police down here.
He rode my son's school bus.
So what happened? Tell me what you were told.
They said that the state police came to the door and told us that we had to evacuate, that there was a state of emergency, and they said there's a bomb on the street.
The police haven't confirmed a report that explosives were found in the family home, but it's known that Crooks followed a website about guns and detonations.
The FBI is searching the house. They've been here through the night, and a key question for them will be over any motive and whether Crooks's politics played any role. Records show that he was a registered Republican, but he also gave $15 to a progressive or liberal campaign group on the day Joe Biden was sworn into office.
In his high school yearbook, Crooks appears as a smiling teenager.
Yeah, I was sitting down here.
One former classmate is baffled about what switched for this once diligent student.
He was always getting good grades on tests, everything like that. He was very passionate about history, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. He was a nice kid, and I had never had an experience with him where I was like, he, you know, isn't nice. He was always nice, and I was always friendly to him.
America's suburbs were always set to decide this coming election. Now fear and angry division is deepening, not because of the ballot box, but the barrel of a gun. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Bethel Park, Pennsylvania.
Well, our correspondent Nomia Iqbal joins us now live from Milwaukee, where the Republican Party's convention takes place this week. And Nomia, Donald Trump was always going to be the centre of attention, even more so now, and he's clearly determined to carry on with his plans there.
This is a big week for Donald Trump. The Republican National Convention is essentially his show. There's lots of high-profile Republicans in town, and he will basically be confirmed, what we already suspect, the party's presidential candidate. But he has said in an interview to a newspaper in the US this evening that he plans for his big speech later this week to focus on unity rather than President Biden's policies. And unity is what President Biden wants as well. Both men are effectively returning to the campaign trail this week, but I think what will be hugely scrutinised is the tone with which they campaign. I mean, the election has been so divisive. It was in 2020 as well. So if both men do want to take down the temperature, that will be hugely watched. Another important point to make here is that the Republican Party is unified behind Donald Trump even more than ever before. I think there's a feeling by many of them that this assassination attempt on Donald Trump may lead to an uptick in support by the public, especially in a race that has been so static. In contrast, if you look at President Biden, for the last few weeks there's been huge pressure on him by members of his own Democratic Party who are worried about his age, his fragility following that presidential debate against Donald Trump, and many of them calling on him to stand down. But that particular political crisis has come to a standstill for now.
And the voting for the American president doesn't happen for another, 4 months or so. But clearly this moment over the weekend is already shaping and determining the next stage of the campaign for both of these men.
It really is. I mean, that vigil that I attended in the report there, the supporters I met were even more galvanised than ever before. I think it's fair to say they were always going to vote for Donald Trump. Donald Trump supporters are incredibly ardent. They don't sit out elections. They do go to the polls. But this has made them even more determined. And some of them were saying to me that they have met people who aren't sure who to vote for, who are now going to back Donald Trump because of those images that we've seen, those defined images which have in some respects become iconic to many people. I think for President Biden's supporters, many of them, will feel galvanised too, perhaps. Worried that have the events of Saturday led to that uptick in support for Donald Trump? We'll have to see. As I say, the polls are so static; it's really unclear which, who the voters essentially favour to win the presidential election. But we are some time out, and I can tell you, just even a day is very long in politics here in this country.
Nomia, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Nomia Iqbal there in Milwaukee.